Es ist Donnerstag, 20 Uhr, 30 Minuten und 7 Sekunden. Hier ist Königsdorf, hier ist Minden, Nevada, hier ist Late Night Soaring, euer Streckenflug-Stammtisch. Ja, Servus benannt. Und da wir heute mit einem englisch sprechenden Gast sprechen, werde ich sofort in das Englische wechseln. Today we have an English-speaking guest, so this session will be in English. You can ask, of course, in our chat questions in German or in English as you like, and we will ask Jim this in English. Yeah, the topic today is flying in the western US, especially in Nevada, and we are really proud to have one of the most famous glider pilots in the world today in this session. So welcome, Jim Payne.
Oh, hi, welcome to be here. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's a really pleasure to have you here. We will talk about you, we will talk about the flying area of Nevada, and of course, we will talk a little bit later on about the Berlin project. We will talk a little bit about some special airplanes you are flying, like the Nixos and the Sparrowhawk, which is not so known in Germany or in Europe. And I think it will be one of the interesting sessions we ever had. Yeah, and with me here from Königsdorf as well, one of the beginning of now, who is it? It's Michael Wiesbacher. You has the idea of late night soaring. Welcome, Michael.
Good evening, everybody.
Yeah, I have a short introduction, who we have today. You see my screen right now?
Yes.
Okay. That's a list I got from the old CE. Thank you to Heiko Hertrich, who gave me this information. There are only 6 pilots in the world flown more than 2,000 kilometers. And one of those is Jim Payne. His 14 flights above 2,000 kilometers. He's number 2 in the world behind Klaus Ullmann. And he has flown 44 flights, more than 1,500 kilometers, and 125 flights, more than 1,000 Ks. It's unbelievable. And another interesting thing you can see at this table, if you look at the right side, it's only possible to fly more than 2,000 Ks right now in the US. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 pilots did it in the US, and 2 pilots did it in Argentina. We have another interesting table here with the fastest man of the world. The first is the fastest flights with long distance flight with more than 1,000 Ks, which is all around 250 Ks for the whole distance. And there we see we have 30 pilots flying faster than 220 as average. And there we have 3 times Jim Payne. We have 2 times Keith Essex. So it's altogether 5 also in the area we are talking about. And the others, there are another 3 from Johannes König. And all the others are as well flown in Argentina. The second column below, it's for the leak speed. You know, we are measuring 2.5 hours, the fastest speed. And we have Dennis Tito as well flying in the same area as Jim is flying with more than 300 kilometers. That's the actual speed. It's not the index reduced speed. And on the second place, we have Jim Payne, who is also right now has a world record in the 1,000 K out and return flight with 255 Ks. Yeah, that's really, really impressive what you did. I have a picture of all the flights in Nevada. Actually, this is a picture of all flights, more than 1,000 points in the US. And you see 3 spots. The middle one is Colorado. We talked about in December already. And I think on the east, we have another spot we have to talk about, the Appalachians. And there were the most flights are done with more than 1,000 Ks in the US is the area of Minden, Nevada, and as well the airports around Ely and Parowan. Then I had all the flights out of the OLC, out of Minden, and Jim, we talked in the couple of minutes ago about those 4 flights going out of Minden for just out and without return. You can maybe talk a little bit about this. What was that flights going for?
The lower one was, and the next one were done in thermals. The second one up was done this year by Jim Lee. And the top 2 flights are done by Gordon Bettinger and Wave.
Yeah, and you have a challenge for the longest just one-way flight, isn't it?
Yes, the Soaring Society of America gives a trophy each year for the longest straight flight that anybody accomplishes, called the Behringer Trophy.
Yeah, and you won it in Minden most probably a couple of times, huh?
Actually, I came close one year from Uvalde, Texas. I flew to Guyman, Oklahoma after a standard class nationals. It was 527 miles. And Wally Scott, who won the Behringer Trophy many years, he at the end of the year called me up and said, "How far did you go?" And then the next day he did a flight that was about 10 kilometers more.
Just 10 kilometers, okay. And what's going on the next day if you're going out 800 kilometers? Like you're flying back, or what's the plan for the next day then?
Well, it depends. In the case of Uvalde, I was on the way home from the contest, so it made a big deviation. Jim Lee, when he made the flight last year, he actually hitchhiked to the airport, got a plane ticket, flew home, and then a few days later, he drove there with the car. Now, he was on his way to a contest in the East, so it wasn't too far out of his way. But,
okay. Okay.
But Gordon,
yeah.
Gordon has a good friend, so his good friend took off and was following him. So his friend got there, I think, the next morning, but that's kind of his shtick. He's trying to do 2,000 kilometers straight out.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah, and the last slide I do have, that's all the flights of Jim Payne out of Minden. And as you see clearly, it's on the ridge. The most flights are done in the waves. So what do you like more, wave flying or thermal flying?
Wow, Greg, I love them both. I've had such success in the wave, I guess, wave flying. It's amazing, the energy in the atmosphere and the ability to cruise for long periods near, VNE. It's pretty amazing.
Okay, but before we start, with your presentation, I think everybody knows the name Jim Payne in the glider world, but I don't think that really many have seen you before and don't. So just introduce our audience a little bit about you. Who is Jim Payne?
Okay, well, let me start my presentation here. Well, I've been extremely lucky over the years to be in the right place at the right time with the right experience. This is a picture taken from the house I used to own at the Rosamond Sky Park, an airport, which is residential. And all of my first wave flying was pretty much done in this area. In the beginning, growing up, my dad, he flew B-17s, but he never went to Europe, so he never bombed Germany. But just listening to his stories made me interested in flying. And I ended up going to the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. I soloed in 1971 and made my first wave flight way back in 1972. And the wave is such an interesting phenomenon. In the rotor zone, the turbulence is so strong, and in the lifting zone, the air is so laminar. It's utterly amazing. I even wrote a paper when I was a cadet on making high altitude flights in a sailplane using a pressure suit. After I graduated from pilot training in the Air Force, I got to fly F-4s in Iceland And then I was an aggressor pilot, flying F-5s in England. Spent a lot of time touring Europe, places like Bitburg and Dutch Mamano. And I went to test pilot school at Edwards Air Force Base in 1982. And while I was there, I had a 126. It was the only sailplane I could afford at the time. I paid $10,000 for it. And I got a gold altitude and a diamond altitude flying the 126. At that time, I dreamed of setting speed records in the wave, but you had the issue with the start finish. The start finish had to be within 1,000 meters of the ground. And while I could imagine, a start over a high peak, at that time, it wouldn't be practical to have someone go up there and set up a start gate. So in 84, I set a standard class record for the US, and I became a staff member on the test pilot school staff in 1985. And they had a project called Project Soaring at the time. And we put a pressure suit system in a Grobe 103 sailplane. Kind of interesting. We scavenged parts from all over the base. We had an F-16 liquid oxygen system. The pressure suit came from the SR-71. We had a backpack for bailout oxygen bottle that came from the X-15 program. Had an F4 turn needle in the panel, T38 quantity gauge for the liquid oxygen system, and so on. And I flew that sailplane several times. And the maximum altitude we got to is 42,000 feet, 12,900 meters. There's a very interesting phenomenon on that particular day. The winds died off at the tropopause, which was around 42,000 feet. And this and other wave flying experience kind of convinced us that in the stratosphere, the winds would die off and you probably couldn't soar in the stratosphere. Well, Einar Einavoldsson, he's the guy that started the Perlin project, and he discovered the polar vortex, which causes strong winds in the stratosphere. And in the regions in the wintertime where these strong winds occur, such as southern Patagonia and in the northern hemisphere, say over Sweden or the Ural Mountains, it's possible to soar high. After I retired from the Air Force, I worked for 10 years at Northrop Grumman. I managed the Global Hawk flight test and did first flight on a Northrop airplane called the Firebird. And then in 2011, after I retired from Northrop, that's when I got involved with the Perlin project. I had helped Einar Einavoldsson with technical advice when he did Perlin 1. He and Steve Fawcett, they flew to above 50,000 feet with DG 505. And the challenge with the normal sailplane is the pressure suit gets very stiff. Above 35,000 feet, it starts adding pressure. By the time you get to 50,000 feet, it's very difficult to move. And the other problem is no matter how well you seal the canopy, it's going to leak. So the temperature inside the cabin is going to be approximately the same as the outside. Whereas in the Perlin, because it's pressurized, we have no leak coming inside. So, the temperature in the cabin is probably on the shady side. It might be minus 20 C, but, it's a comfortable, 0 to minus 5 in the rest of the cabin. So it's compatible to fly with. So now I have about 12,500 total flying hours. 7,200 of those are in sailplanes, and I bet almost 2,000 of those are probably in wave. I've had the privilege of setting 17 world records over the years and 15 OLC world championships, 9 of them in the speed and 6 of them in distance. I made first flights on the Firebird, the Perlin 2, and the Nixus. As a test pilot, that's kind of a big deal, making first flights. But it's been quite a ride over the years.
What's a Firebird?
Oh, I should have put a picture in here. A Firebird is a single-engine piston airplane. It's a pusher. It has booms like a P-38. And it was designed to be an optionally piloted vehicle. So you could fly it from the ground without a pilot or with a crew. So if you look at, and look it up online, Firebird from Northrop Grumman. But the interesting airplane.
And I have another question to the Perline project. It's a little bit calmer on the project. I think the last flight is already 2 years ago, where you were above 20,000 meters, isn't it?
Yes. Unfortunately, the last time we were in Argentina was 2019, and we did not go in 2020 and 21 because of COVID. And then last year we did not go because the container shipping system was in such chaos, they would not guarantee they could get our container to Argentina in time. So this year we're planning on going back. We're optimistic that the container shipping system has recovered so that we can return to Argentina, but you never know. We have to make a decision in February.
Okay, so it was just a COVID problem that we doesn't hear anything about the project.
No, we actually flew the Perlin 2 at the air show in Oshkosh in July.
Okay.
So we were actually home. We took it to Oshkosh so people could see it.
Yeah. So
okay, the Sierra Nevada. What? Sorry?
I haven't been to Oshkosh. I didn't saw it.
Well, you should put it on your bucket list. It's very much worth doing.
Yeah. Okay, I do.
Okay, I was asked to talk a little bit about wave forecasting. Old school, my first order forecast is a 500 millibar chart. Basically, you want the winds so that they're approximately perpendicular to the spine of the range that you're flying along. And at 18,000 feet, normally that's what I looked at first. I would like the winds to be on the order of 50 knots, maybe plus or minus 10 knots. If the winds are too light, the wave will be too weak. And of course, if the winds are too strong, then it's a big challenge to stay with the wave and make transitions. And if the 50 millibar or 500 millibar chart looked good, then I'd look at SKU-T charts, looking for wind profile and stability. In the last maybe 10 years, the internet models have gotten very good. And, as a first order look, I look at internet models. And if they're looking good, I look at other information, especially the SKU-T charts. Those give you information on the wind speed as you climb. You want a gradual increase in the wind speed. And also you can see any changes in direction. Often if you have a sudden change in direction, that'll cap the wave. And we're looking for stability so that the wave can propagate. So wave cross country, I'd been long interested in it. My first long wave cross country was back in 1995. My brother and I had bought a ASH 25, and we did a 1,220 kilometer flight in wave from California City. One thing that's important to understand is the mechanics of speed in the wave. So I've got a vector diagram here. This is a diagram at 14,000 feet, where on a standard day, it's minus 6 degrees centigrade. If you're running along at 194 kph, that gives you 244 kph true airspeed. And to say the winds are 40 knots, 74 kilometers per hour. Well, if you do the math here, even though the winds are so strong, because of your high speed, you actually get a pretty good ground speed. You're only losing, 13 kilometers per hour on your ground speed. And then the other thing that is important if you're going to have a fast flight is no stopping or circling is allowed. Mentioned the number of 2,000 kilometer flights I've done. Most of those flights, I rarely stop to zigzag. You just keep the hammer down, keep going fast. Occasionally you'll have to stop and zigzag if you're making a transition and end up getting a little bit low. Kind of as a technique, I've adopted a low risk philosophy. Soar for fun. You're not going to get rich off soaring. So I tend to fly such that I have maximum potential energy. so that if there is a transition in a wave or a gap, I'm able to have extra range. And it seems to not matter on the good days, especially because you're cruising so close to redline. You can make the very long flights in a short time. So wave records, in 1996, the GPS solved the start issue. Basically, you did not have to have a person on the ground or actually people underground to operate a start gate. And for those that may be new to soaring, whoops, just let me see if I can find a pointer here. On the right-hand side, can you see the pointer or is it not showing up?
We can see the.
Pardon me?
We can see the mouse. So
okay, if you see the mouse, okay.
Yeah.
So when they first started GPS records, the start point and the finish point could be 10 kilometers apart and still be a closed course. So what I did on my first wave record is I had a start point that was 10 kilometers from the finish point. The finish point I put on the top of a mountain, which was 8,000 feet, so about 2,500 meters. And then I was able to start at 11,000 feet, go straight to the wave. You do a zigzag in the wave, and then you come back to the finish point. And so here's a graphic of that flight. I took off from California City. I was flying my Discus A, and climbed in the wave here, went to Inyakern. There are some beauties of this setup. Number one, Inyakern, a very nice airport right here. So if you fall out of the wave, you got a good place to land. And my start point was here, 11,000 feet, finish point here on Owens Peak, which is 8,000 feet. And actually made 2 laps, first lap to make sure there was no bad turbulence or other issues. And I think the average speed was 235 kilometers per hour. And this is flown dry because I didn't want to have freezing problems with the water ballast. But I think that was the first claim of a record more than 200 kilometers per hour. Now, the record was approved by the U.S. Soaring Society of America and the National Aeronautic Association, but it was denied by the FAI because it did not meet did not meet the spirit of the rules. They agreed that it met the intent of the rules, but not the spirit because of the 10-kilometer gap. So also that year, actually a couple of years later, my brother and I claimed a couple of wave records from Cal City on the same day. In this graphic here is 2 wave flights, one in the morning, which is a 300-kilometer out and return, and then in the afternoon, a 500-kilometer out and return. And the colors change once an hour. So if you pick a spot that might be light blue, that's how far I traveled in 1 hour. Down here is California City, Mojave is here, Inyakern is here, Bishop is here. So this is the high part of the Sierra. And between Inyakern and Bishop is the best part of the Sierra. That's the fantastic section where I flew the 300-kilometer out and return. This is just a 300-kilometer out and return. At this time, we had to start over a spot on the ground. The start gate had not been removed from the ground. So I'm starting here. And you see little zigzags here? At the time I did this flight, we did not have our agreement with Edwards Air Force Base to allow us to fly into Class A airspace, which starts at flight level 180. So these zigzags were made when I was going as fast as I dared. And I was going to be pushed up into the Class A airspace. So I had to keep moving forward to get out of the lift to stay below 180. And this is another picture kind of as an oblique. So I was on the red trace going north and the green trace coming back south. And then here is the 500 out and return. So that I started down by Mojave. And going north is the light blue trace. Did that to stay in the lift, make the transition. And up to actually Big Pine, and then back to near Mojave. And that's another kind of oblique look at it. And that's my brother Tom and I after our flights. So the 300 out and return was 269 kph, and the 500 out and return was just a couple minutes short of less than 2 hours. So in 2000, I actually held the 6 fastest records that ever been claimed. I did the 235 in the discus, the 232 out and return was done in the discus. And then the first record in the SH-25 was a 212 kilometer triangle that met the spirit of the reg. And then the out and returns I just talked about. And then in 2000, 100 kilometer triangle again in the discus. Okay, safety. Of course, the most important thing when you're flying in a wave is to make sure you keep blood saturation of oxygen that allows you to think. On all these airplanes, I've had a good oxygen supply. And, in recent years, we've been using the EDS oxygen system. Thermal stress, it's very easy to get very cold. I've never had frostbite, but I've gotten pretty cold on a couple of occasions, especially my feet. And over the years, we've evolved to using electrically heated, especially socks or insoles and underwear. In the ASH-25, for instance, I now have 100 amp hour batteries, so that allows you to kind of run the heaters as needed. And then flutter, of course. Knock on wood, I've never fluttered anything. But when you're operating at these high speeds, if something's been damaged, or say somebody did a repair on a flight control and didn't mass balance it properly and stuff, that's always a risk. So, you want to understand the flight manual and the limits that are established for each altitude. The fast flight that Dennis Tito did and that I did in the Arcus M, those were Arcus M's that Mr. Tito owned. And all of those had a modification that Schempp had done when they were built to increase the V&E. As I recall, the V&E is 142 knots indicated up to like 8,000 meters. So those are special airplanes. Turbulence, knock on wood. I have never really had, except on one occasion, a surprise gust that caused me to think afterwards, wow, that was scary, in all the thousands of hours. The wave, once you get well above the ridge top, tends to be extremely smooth, but it's always a consideration. So, if you're flying in a yellow arc, you always got to be cognizant of what's going on. If you're going to encounter turbulence at those high altitudes, it's probably going to be a transition in air masses, and or it might be at a gap in the wave where you might get a funny vortex. So those are places where you want to be especially careful. And then sink. It is utterly amazing how fast the airplane will sink. I think I've seen 40 knots. So that's what, 40 knots, 20 meters per second. And it could go on for long times. I've also seen, like 14 meters a second climb rate. But where there's lift, there's probably sink if you're not careful. And position reporting, when I first started wave flying, of course, we did not have in-reaches and those kinds of trackers. So I was pretty careful to give position reports. In America, I used to use the flight service stations to give position reports and or, relays through my buddies if we happen to be flying at the same time.
But I guess Jim, I guess you're flying right now with transponder as well.
Absolutely. Yes, yes. We have the,
Is there a problem with ATC to get the clearance as you like, or?
At Edwards Air Force Base, the soaring community has an agreement, which we call Stage 2 clearance. And typically, if you request that the day prior, they're almost 100% in giving us a clearance. Basically their attitude is they'd rather know you're there and that you're talking to the air traffic control than being VFR at 17,000 feet. So the folks around Edwards Air Force Base have been extremely positive. Now, all the test pilots, they go through soaring training at Tehachapi as part of the curriculum, end up soloing and doing spin training in gliders. So they're all, for the most part, people that love flying. So they're very supportive. So the Edwards Air Force airspace ends just south of Bishop. So from there north, a lot of us have letters of agreement with Oakland Center. And Oakland Center, when traffic permits, will give us a clearance, typically a block altitude from like 17,000 to flight level 220. It doesn't pay to get much above 220. Typically lift is stronger down low. The advantage of getting above 180 is it gives you extra potential energy to cross gaps or to make transitions. Occasionally, especially the winds are straight out of the west, when you're making the transition at Mammoth, their airport's closed today due to snow is why that symbol is there. But from right here to up here sometimes is a difficult upwind transition. And if you're 220 or 230 here, it's much easier than if you're down at 17 or 17.5 when you're right here. The Sierra here, the tops, let's see, highest point in the 48 states is right here, Mount Whitney. But there's a lot of 14,000 foot peaks here. In this area, they're more on the order of 12,000. And here you got, 12 to 10,000. And then up in this area, the highest peak near Minden is 11,000 feet. So the mountains are lower up here. But basically, if you want to go fast, you really want to stay, a couple thousand feet above the ridge tops. Now, people ask about outlanding. We're pretty fortunate that there's airports along the way. There's a private airport right here that we call Topaz International, and he's pretty friendly. So especially in the summer when we're thermal flying and people are trying to do really long flights, if at the end of the day it dies a little bit early, that's a place that you can land. There is an airport here called Sweetwater that they actually fly C-130s out of. It's dirt, but it's long and wide in Bridgeport, Lee Vining, Mammoth, Bishop, Independence, Lone Pine, Inyakern, Cal City, Mojave, and on down to Rosamond. And then out in the desert, there's other airports. Tonopah is up here, and Hadley. That's a private airport. You can land there, but they won't let you take off. And then there's lots of dry lakes, which are excellent landing airports, except when it's a wet season. Minden this year has had an unusual amount of snow already. Some of the ski areas around Lake Tahoe have already had 300 inches of snow so far this year. So, 300 inches is, 600, that's like 750 centimeters of snow already. So,
we don't have
the dry lake
in Germany.
Yes, we'd like to give you some of it.
Yeah.
But this year, the dry lakes, you won't be able to count on landing on those probably till July or August. But, on a good day when you're making a long flight and we're in thermals, you're working, 4,000 to 5,000 meters. You've got lots of range. So there's plenty of places to land. Okay, safety equipment. On Dennis's Arcus, we had 3 different oxygen systems. From the factory, had a 77 cubic foot oxygen bottle in the tail boom aft of the engine, which really makes it nice. Of course, we're using trackers, satellite phone, MODES transponders, Power Farm, which has ADS-B in, and ELT and personal locator beacons. On the Arcus, we fly with clear vision panels. It's kind of interesting. The ASH-25, I've never had troubles with the canopy fogging, but Arcus Duodiscus, they seem to have fogging issues. So basically, this is just another piece of, I think it's acrylic with weather stripping around the edge. And basically, it insulates the canopy to keep it from frosting. Okay, let me talk about a couple of flights here. This flight was the flight on April 5th, 2015. It was forecast to be an excellent day. The winds are basically perpendicular to our line of flight. I declared a 1,000-kilometer out and return flight on this day, and my start point actually was way down here by Inyakern, and the turn point was up north of Reno. And so I took off from Minden. It was one of those days you get off tow. I got off tow relatively low, maybe 3,000 AGL or so. And it was just straight ahead at 1,000 feet a minute coming south till we got up and went down to the start point. And there's good clouds going all the way north. Went north, came back, and I think the total duration for the out and return was less than 4 hours. So we claimed the record for 1,000-kilometer out and return speed at 255 kph. And on this particular day, Joshua and Oakland, I the letter of agreement, were excellent in helping us get around the course. And then after we did our out and return, we kept flying. And at the very end of the day, I'm up here, and it's like almost 2 hours before sunset. And, the computer says we got 2,900 kilometers, but to the north, it was completely undercast. There was absolutely no place to land if I'd gone north. And if, the thundercast hadn't been there, we're at 17,500. We probably could have gone at least 150 more kilometers. But that's the way it is on some of these days. Some days you run out of space before you run out of time. Here are some pictures. Go ahead.
How long is the distance from the most southern turn point you can take in the wave to the most northern point, which is makeable?
If I went all the way down to Gorman to Susanville, that may be enough distance to break the record for 3 turn point. It'd be more than enough to do 3,000 kilometers. It might be enough to do 3,300 kilometers.
Okay.
On 6 legs.
On 6 legs. Yeah. So it was a good thing for the 5th and the 6th leg of the OC,
yes. 20
years ago.
now with 4 legs, we might be able to break the record for 4 legs also. Now, I have several times made a transition from the Mojave area, which is the south end of the Sierra, to the mountain range that's east of LA. And then I've gone on down south to the Mexican border. And there are a couple of days I probably could have gone 250 Ks into Mexico if air traffic would allow. And you never want to land on that peninsula. You might never get your sailplane home. So, so the absolute longest flight would probably be start at Mojave, go to Susanville, do 3 laps there. And when you get back to Mojave, then you transition to the mountain range east of Los Angeles and go down to the Mexican border. So that would be the absolute greatest distance, I think.
So it's
So this is
at the end was 2,907 kilometers.
yes.
So
Plus we flew back to Minden, which was like 1,020 kilometers. So we actually flew more than 3,000 that day because we threw away a seventh.
Oh, it was the seventh leg. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So the little triangle here is where the photo was taken. And so this is looking north towards Owens Lake. This here is looking down the valley in Kings Canyon. On this particular day, as the day went along, we acquired more moisture. So this is at the south end of the Carson Valley where Minden is, looking north. Whoops. Lost my cursor again, but the Minden Airport is underneath the cloud right there. Okay. This is, see, coming back north again. And here we are back south, looking south down the Owens Valley. This is Mono Lake, which is north of Mammoth. And this is the end of the day. I was flying with Alan Coombs back at Minden. And that's me and Jackie and Alan. Jackie being a world famous crew person, she's been outstanding. I couldn't have done everything I've done without her support and help. And then
so how much data do you have in this time of the year? You're always flying in May, June, isn't it? This is the best time of the year.
For the waves, they're most frequent in March and April. I think I've actually flown a wave at Minden every month of the year. You know, July, it's typically early July, and then the last week of August, the wave may return. You know, last year I had a good flight in the Nixus in the wave in June, and there were a few years back I had a very long 2,000 plus K flight in July from Minden. But you know, if people ask me when should they come to Minden to have the best chance of wave, it would be sometime in late March through late April.
Okay.
And in 2016, this is the fastest flight. The day before, I'd flown a long flight with Miguel, starting at Minden. And again, we had encroachment of weather from the north. So I landed at Rosamond. And then the next day we launched out of Rosamond and basically flew 3 laps in the good zone between Inyakern and south of Bishop. And on the last lap, we averaged 305 kph, which is a US record for 300 out and return. You know, it's unfortunate that the world doesn't keep a 300 out and return. Actually, they should have 100 out and return so that people in the Guinness book can be impressed. You know, several of these flights over the years have been in Guinness, but this was done again in one of Dennis Tito's archive, which have the increased VNE. And myself, Jackie, and Miguel. One thing we've taken to doing is flying with a helmet, and there's some huge pluses to the helmet. Number one, it's better than a skull cap for keeping your head warm. Number two, if you ever bang your head on the canopy in a gust, you're probably not going to cut your forehead. You know, actually, when I was a cadet, we used to wear hockey helmets when we flew because some cadet had had a head injury when he outlanded. And it makes it quieter. You know, no matter how well you seal your airplane, if you're cruising around at 120 or 130 knots indicated airspeed, you're going to have a little bit of noise. And so using the intercom, it allows you to communicate better and especially hear the radio better. And this is a picture taken on that day. And this is taken from up north, Big Pine, south of Bishop, looking south. And you've got the fantastic rotor cloud there that's just marking the highway in the sky. Like one day, Dennis Tito used to have a Cessna Citation Mustang, which I have a type rating in. And one day I was flying him down to Inyakern, and it looked just like this when we got to Bishop. So in the Citation Mustang, I'm in front of a cloud that looks like this, powers in idle. I think we were doing like 190 knots indicated airspeed and level flight. We just flew the whole valley in idle with the Citation. It's just absolutely phenomenal. Something to have on your bucket list. And here we are after
you didn't
flight.
put the slide with the Citation on the OLC. I haven't seen an index of the Citation.
Yeah, we didn't have a flight recorder, but the index was terrible. Yeah.
Actually, there was a question in the chat. What is the difference between a normal Arcus and this Arcus with a higher VNE? What was changed actually?
I actually don't know the details. I know there's some changes made to the interior structure of the wing, but and there might be some other subtle changes. But engineering at Chimperth, they didn't give us any of the drawings or anything, which I wouldn't expect them to do.
Okay.
But definitely there is a structural change to the interior of the wing. Okay, so planning, you know, you want to know your sailplane instruments, and that really involves practice. You know, I've met guys that want to know if they should buy winglets for their sailplane. And typically the best answer is you don't fly enough, spend the money on tows so you get a lot more flying. You know, $200 of flying a year is going to do more for your success than say if you're flying 25 or 50 hours a year. You know, be proficient, fly during the off season, know your area, of course, study maps, and the flight logs that are available on the various websites where people have posted flights. That's a gold mine. You know, back in the old days, you know, people like fishing stories. It's easy to embellish, you know, where you went on a flight. You know, we knew some guys that used to come to Ely, and every flight they made was 1,000 K. And, but nobody ever posted a flight log or actually showed where they went. You know, study the weather. And even if you're not able to fly, compare the forecast, you know, what you see. You know, on wave days, satellite photos can tell you a tremendous amount of if there's little cloud cover of where the waves set up and how long it lasted and so on. Know your rules. You know, the rules for like the OLC and FAI are quite a bit different in some cases. And when you create tasks, you know, always think lines of lift. You know, if you can create a task in a wave where you're always in the line of lift, you're going to be able to go fast. And people ask, what are the secrets of long flights? You know, the most important thing is location. You know, that's what the real estate agents in America say. The most important three things in real estate is a location. Learn the weather. You know, start as early as possible on these really long wave flights. You know, we're trying to take off before dawn. You know, the Arcai have lights on them. So in America, it's legal to fly VFR at night. And then soar until sunset. And again, with a light so you can land after sunset. Dennis, actually, 2 of the Arcai are modified to be night vision goggle compatible. And, you know, we've flown flights in the wave at night. The problem is the cold. When the sun goes down, it's, you know, an order of magnitude more cold. It's amazing how much energy the sun actually helps with the cold.
And of course, the location. Is Minden really the best location to make the real long distance flights?
Wow. I'd have to say that the Andes are better. On a perfect day, the spine is a lot longer. But if you want, you yeah, the trouble with going to Argentina is the logistics. It's extremely expensive to ship stuff. Unfortunately, the political situation is such that importing stuff, even temporarily, is a huge challenge. But if you're ever able to fly in Argentina, it's another thing to have on your bucket list. Whereas Minden, in terms of total amenities, quality of life, we're right here near Reno and Carson City and Minden. There's lots of things for the crews to do. From my house, it's 30 minutes to Heavenly Ski Area. And, they've had like 230 inches of snow already this year. So it's a great place to be all around.
Yeah, no, actually the question was not in comparison with Argentina. It was in the Nevada, to fly away from the Nevada. Is this the southern studying places not better?
In your current, if you had to pick one absolute place to be, I would say Inyakern, at the southern end of the Owens Valley. That's probably going to give you the most potential distance. But again, Inyakern in the summertime, a typical high there is 40 centigrade. On a good soaring day, it's probably 45 degrees centigrade. So it's really brutal for the crews on thermal days. But my first FAI triangle was flown from Inyakern in the SH-25. One upside is the ridge is on the west side of the valley. So in the morning, the first thermals tend to follow the ridges. So you can ridge soar very early and you get an early start from Inyakern. The challenge, of course, is it's right next to the restricted airspace. Sometimes getting back may be a little bit more challenging because of restricted airspace. But in general, you're going to go fastest along the Sierra. And it depends on the weather. Some days Inyakern might be better. Some days Minden might be better. But overall, Inyakern would probably be the best place if you could only fly from one place. And a world record certificate. I was asked a little bit about the Sparrowhawk. In 2009, I borrowed a Sparrowhawk from Greg Cole, who was a builder. This is an extremely interesting sailplane. Each wing weighs about 12 kilos. The whole airplane weighs about 150 pounds. I don't know how much that is in kilos, but given all that, it actually has a pretty good L over D. Because it's so light, it's extremely maneuverable. One interesting thing that I would change if it was mine is using some composite cord for the rudder cables, and it's stretchy. So if you push on one rudder with, say, 40 kilos force and 20 kilos force on the other one, both pedals are on the floor, the rudder's in the middle, and you might think that you're got a rudder input made. So you got to be really careful with the rudder. And then the only other complaint I had is the air brakes had a fulcrum that was on the aft bulkhead, and the bulkhead would flex a little bit. So at really high speeds, the spoilers would tend to pull out a little bit. So you have to fly with your hand on the air brake handle to keep them closed. But other than that, it was a fantastic experience. It's amazing, the performance. So I claimed 5 world records with it, including one record over 1,000 kilometers. I think it's 1,002 kilometers. So this was the longest flight I made, which is 1,259 kilometers on 6 legs, and it was 1,002 on 4 legs. But took off from Rosamond and basically worked between Mojave and Bishop. At this time, we did not have the Sage 2 clearance. So you notice where I'm bumping against the Class A limit. But then getting home was a challenge. The first attempt to go home, I found sink, went back to Inyakern, climbed up, second attempt, found sink again. So the third route finally got me high enough to get to Mojave. I actually had enough altitude to get to Roseman at the end of the day, but it was approaching sunset. So I landed at Mojave to make sure that I didn't land past sunset since it didn't have lights on it.
It looks like you were pretty low at one point. How easy is it to get back into the wave from altitude that low?
It depends. That was essentially just a kilometer or two upwind of Inyakern Airport. And, I kind of knew that was where the wave was set up. And, you can see it was a pretty good climb once I got back in the wave.
Yeah, it looks like you got straight into the wave again from
yes.
down low.
Yes, I'm coming from the upwind direction, so I'm just coming back to the wave, and the instant you find it, it's there. Yep, excellent. And this is a Chamber of Commerce photo that I took flying a Sparrowhawk. On the left is a 302 Vario, and that's the Netto. If the up goes past 10, that's 10 knots. It goes past it. So actually, the Netto right there is 12 and a half knots. On the right is a Sage mechanical Vario. That's showing my average climb, actually the current climb rate. So only 1 knot because I'm at 17.5, worried about getting pushed up into the Class A airspace. The airspeed doesn't show up here, but I'm flying pretty close to red line at this point. And here's just some couple pictures of flying it up and down the Sierra, going by Mount Whitney. And this is looking down the Owens Valley. Again, we've got some rotor clouds kind of marking where the rotor is and some lenticulars up high. Okay, this is looking across the valley at the White Mountains. And the White Mountains are downwind of Bishop, White and Inyo Mountains. And in the summertime, on a good day, you end up with a beautiful cloud streak that goes up and down these mountains. And if you study flights from Minden, you'll see a lot of thermal flights that go up and down the White/Inyo mountain range. And typically in the summertime, it's drier over there, so the cloud base is higher and the lift is stronger. And this is Owens Lake. Basically, the wave is touching down there, and you can see it scouring the dust, and the dust goes straight up to the clouds. So pretty fantastic lift. Okay, so any quick questions about wave flying before I talk a few minutes about the Nixes?
What do you think is the maximum distance you really can fly within 6 legs in the Nevada Valley?
I would say probably 3,300 kilometers.
Okay.
And then if you started at Inyakern and you were able to transition and go down to the Mexican border, that might get you up to 35 or 3,600 kilometers. That's on 6 legs.
Yeah, of course, on 6 legs.
Yeah.
So, okay, so it stays interesting what we're going to see.
Yes. Okay. So the Nixus, fly-by-wire sailplane, it was commissioned by Sergio Grande in Brazil. And basically, he wanted to push the state of the art. Paulo Iskold is the guy that did all the engineering. It's basically an SH-30 fuselage with special wings that Paulo built. 92-foot wingspan, 28 meters, 53.3 aspect ratio. I think only the Concordia has a higher aspect ratio. And in order to do this, it's fly-by-wire. Why fly-by-wire? It eliminates all the mixing linkages and stuff that's inside a normal ASH-30 wing. It allows the wings to be much thinner, so you get the higher aspect ratio. You can tailor the roll control. It provides automatic flap optimization and reduces the pilot workload. One other thing I forgot to mention about the Arcus, Morgan Sandercock built an automatic flap system for the Arcus. So basically, he's calculating the lift coefficient based on wing load, on the G-force and the airspeed, and automatically moving the flaps. And it greatly reduces the pilot workload. And the fly-by-wire has been a huge success for Paul here. He fabricated the wings out of carbon fiber. He built this autoclave here on the left so he could cook the carbon fiber. I'm not going to go completely through this, but basically it's a 3-channel system. So we got, triple redundant, and then the power is dual redundant. You got 2 separate 80 amp hour batteries. It typically draws about 4 amps of current. So with 80 amp hours of battery, theoretically, we've got 20 hours. And the longest flight I've made in the Nixus is, I think, 12 and a half hours to date. When you do something like this, you always got to do your ground testing. One challenge when the wing is as flexible as the wing that is on the Nixus is how do you do the load test of the wing? And Paulo built this structure, and this is what happened. When he did the drawings and the design.
Do you show the presentation right now? Because we can't see, it still shows the white screen with the Nixus PPT link on it.
Oh, really? I'm seeing my Nixus slides here.
Maybe you can stop screen sharing and then start it again with the other presentation.
Okay. Okay, I see it. It went to a different page. Okay. Let me back up a second then. Can you see it now?
Yeah, we can see it now.
Okay. All right. Now my up-down arrow doesn't work, so I don't know what's going on here. Anyway, there's what happened when we did the load test on the wing. On the left, he had the big structure because of the curve. And what happened in hindsight was when they laid up the joint for the outer panel, it was not done correctly. So one of the shear webs is not right. So, doing our ground test paid off. So Paulo actually rebuilt a new outboard section, repaired the inboard section, and we went and repeated the test. But this is, our ground load test. So you never want to cut corners there. Okay. Now it's working fine. I'm just going back. There's a list of why we did the fly-by-wire. Here's the autoclave that he built to cook the spars in when he did the wing. As I mentioned, we got a triple redundant system with 2 batteries. And there's what I showed you previously. And let's see, here is after it was rebuilt. We did first flight in 2019 at Castle Air Force. It used to be an Air Force base that they flew B-52s out of. Give us a nice long wide runway. We did our phase 1 flight testing, and that was all successful. We did a ground vibration test. We've done the same thing with Perlin. There's a company in San Diego that basically put accelerometers all over the sailplane, vibrated, and created a flutter model so that we can be certain that the airplane's not going to flutter when we're flying at altitude. And then he built the in-flight vibration test system. We actually had really good success not fluttering, but moving the flight controls to make an input. and it's a bunch of performance testing. We did that using Vector Nav, inertial navigation system. And then I now claimed actually 7 US records with it. And I've now got like 310 hours in the Nixus. So basically it says it's feasible for general aviation. And then in flight test, we did a bunch of best practices. One thing I didn't mention is the fly-by-wire system has 6 segments on each side. They're all independent. The outer segment actually has a mechanical linkage to the stick. So if the system completely fails, you still have some roll control. I would not want to land it in gusty winds with the fly-by-wire system not working. But in relatively smooth air, you have more than enough roll control just using the outer panels hooked to the stick. We've flown it up and away with the fly-by-wire system off. So it's I feel pretty safe with the airplane. It's been quite an experience. So questions about the Nixus?
You will fly the 3000, huh? What's this airplane?
That's the airplane, yes.
Yeah, I think you did one flight with 2,500 already with the Nixus.
I did, yes. Yeah. And that was a relatively short day too. So
I'm wondering a little bit about the name Nixus, because it sounds like it's an aircraft of Champert, like Janus, Discus, Ventus, Quintus, and so on.
I think it's I wish Paula was here. I think it's a Latin word that means forward. I'm not a Latin expert, but it means toward the unknown, forward.
How big is the handling difference between a normal glider and the fly-by-wire system?
You can tell that it has a lot of mass. The stick forces, the only stick force you feel is the force from the outer panels. So I tell people it's like flying my SH-25 with power steering. Your arm doesn't get near as tired because the lateral roll forces are relatively light. But again, it's got basically optimized automatic flaps. So you're not dealing with the flap handle while you're flying. I really like the way Paulo mechanized the system. Is the flap handle is in the sailplane as per normal. And to activate the fly-by-wire system, you turn it on and you move the handle full forward. If you pull the handle out of full forward, the system transitions to a following. So basically it's an open loop system where the fly-by-wire goes to the flap position that would be expected if they were manual. So if you pull it out of full forward and you put it in what would be normally 0 flaps, the fly-by-wire system puts the flaps at 0. So in an emergency, if the fly-by-wire system does something that you don't like, just grab the handle and pull it aft, and it puts the flaps at a position commanded by the handle. And normally for takeoff, I use that way I don't have to worry about some freak anomaly in the system. And then I normally fly the tow, and we call that manual. And then when I get off tow, turn the automatic on and put the handle full forward.
Is it more agile with a fly-by-wire system compared to similar gliders with the same wingspan?
I would say yes, but not significantly. You still have the roll damping. You've got the higher wing loading, so there's a little bit less roll damping, I think, than maybe with the ASH-30. But it's still pretty fantastic sailplane. We probably could do more work to optimize the flaps and to optimize the deflections during roll. Again, each segment could be commanded differently. So, maybe on the upside, you could put them up a little bit more to reduce the adverse yaw.
Can you still feel the thermals as good as with a normal glider?
Can I thermal as well?
Like feeling the thermals, because I suppose some of the feeling for the thermal comes from the stick forces, and I think with the fly-by-wire systems you don't have as much stick force.
That's all true. I've had very good luck with it. You feel the changes in bank angle from the gusts on each side. So actually have not flown ASH 30. I've got 1,600 hours in my 25. But it's an open class sailplane, but it's got power steering, so to speak.
Cool, very cool.
Okay, let me stop the share here. And two, then I'll.
Maybe we have some questions to flying before. There was a question: have you ever flown the Duck Hawk in this era?
Yes, I have flown the Duck Hawk, and again, it has relatively low inertias. But another interesting sailplane, yes.
Okay, and the other question was, are there any other locations in the world other than the North and South America where you can think that you could fly great wave conditions?
Wow.
Question is, what are great wave conditions? Let's say more than 2,000 kilometers.
Yes. The Himalayas, if they were turned 90 degrees, would be an interesting wave situation. Unfortunately, as they drop off towards India, I think there's a pretty good prefaces there that would potentially make for some long wave flights. But, really the way the atmosphere at the temperate latitudes generates winds, you need, a mountain range that basically runs pretty much north-south. There are exceptional days when you might have, a north or south wind, but I don't know that you would necessarily have enough distance where the winds are strong enough to make really long flights. So, the Ural Mountains might be interesting, but overall, it's going to be hard to beat the Sierra Nevada and the Andes.
Yeah, I think you see that at the list I showed at the beginning that all the records are flown in Argentina or in the Sierra Nevada.
Yes. And, some people think that dynamic soaring might be the next big thing for distance and speed, but to do dynamic soaring, you have to do a lot of turning and pulling G's. So I can't imagine going faster than we do in the wave when basically you're straight ahead running near red line. And it's very comfortable. You're not pulling G's. Some of these flights, the only turns you really make are when you get to a turn point and reverse direction. Okay. What are you seeing? Are you seeing the polar vortex image or?
No, we still see the white slide with the Perlin 2 link on it.
Okay, so I've got the wrong page here. Let me see if I can. Okay, is that it?
Yes. Now we can see it.
Okay. So the reason we're able to fly very high in the polar regions is the polar night jet, the polar vortex. Basically what happens is in the wintertime, when the sun is not shining on Antarctica, for instance, it gets extremely cold. And the air is moving towards the equator. And because of Coriolis, it generates strong winds at high altitude. We've been launching weather balloons. We've seen 205 knots of wind at 100,000 feet over El Calafate in this phenomenon. Einar Voltson, who's on the left in this picture, he's the one that saw a graphic at a weather shop that pointed to wave in like 75,000 feet over Sweden. So that piqued his interest. And after a bunch of research, he and Steve Fawcett got together. They modified this DG 505 and they flew it to 50,722 feet for a world record. And they got extremely cold. And as I mentioned earlier, the pressure suits became very stiff. So on the way down, they decided to build the Perlin 2, which would be pressurized. Some of the requirements, they originally thought they would try to build an airplane that go to 100,000 feet. But it turns out if you build a sailplane that you can potentially handle underground, i.e. about 25 meter span, you're probably going to now be able to get the wing loading low enough to go to 100,000 feet. So they lowered their goal to 90,000 feet. It's a two-seater for Steve, and he wanted a shirt sleeve environment, i.e. no pressure suit. It's optimized for climb. We have a fixed main wheel because we're flying basically at min-sink speed most of the time. And because the aft cabin bulkhead, which is part of the pressurization system, would be in the way, it'd be a challenge to build something that had a nice retractable gear. The airfoil is optimized for flight level 600. That way you can still climb down low, but at say 10,000 feet, it does not perform near as well as any other 25 meter sailplane. It might be similar just because the Reynolds number is too wrong for that altitude. And true airspeed can be very high at altitude. In fact, at 90,000 feet, your true airspeed is 6.7 times your indicated. We've been to 76,000 feet. And even there, I think it's like 4.3 times as much. So it's a really interesting flying experience. You got this low indicated airspeed, but you got this really fast true airspeed. On the other hand, on the day we went to 76,000 feet, I think the wind speed was like 150, 160 knots at altitude. So our true airspeed is not that much higher than the wind speed. So, our zigzags, it was relatively easy to stay on the wave. V&E at altitude is 54 indicated. If you extrapolate that up, the airplane actually could go to 96,000 feet. That's the point where the stall speed and the V&E would be the same. But we've limited ourselves to 90,000 feet because we have to turn, which means you have to, have a little higher load factor than 1, which basically reduces your V&E because V&E is really caused by the first shock wave that would form on the wing. If you exceed it, nothing bad's probably going to happen except the drag's going to go way up. It might pitch down a little bit. Anyway, that's the limits. So yeah, at 6.7 times 54 is like 360 knots true airspeed if you're at V&E at 90,000 feet. It's highly instrumented. Max gross weight is 2,000 pounds, 84-foot wingspan, so slightly over 25 meters. One thing that we've learned over the years is, it gets to the point where you need to heat things. So the regulators on our air bottle and oxygen bottle are heated. The cameras are heated, otherwise they fail. And we even heat the battery. It turns out if you use a small portion of the energy to heat the battery, you gain back more than you use. It's actually an insulated box. We normally heat it to about 35 degrees C before takeoff. It takes about 4 hours before it cools down to maybe 5 degrees C. And once it gets below 0 degrees C, that's when you start losing effectiveness on the battery. So then we just start heating then. The pressurization system, basically the cabin is a sealed capsule, like Apollo. And we pressurize it with scuba air, 21% oxygen. It's lightly pressurized. We normally have a cabin altitude of about 16,500, which in a extreme emergency, you take your oxygen mask off. You'd probably have mild hypoxia, but you're not going to go asleep. And then maximum differential is 8.5 psi. We're using a rebreather system for two reasons. Number one is you don't want the oxygen concentration in the cabin to get too high. If it does, you have a potential situation like Apollo 1, i.e. a high fire risk. And number two is it captures the moisture that's in your breath. You know, if you just breathe in the cabin, you end up with the windows fogged over. So you end up with 100% humidity in the breathing loop. It actually reduces dehydration. But it's pretty simple. You got a CO2 scrubber, which is in the cylindrical device on the right. And then the other device, which is more round, that's the counter lung. It basically just has a diaphragm in there that goes back and forth opposite your lungs so that the volume in the system is constant. Otherwise, it would be, a forceful exhalation inhalation. But lots of ground tests. There's the wing proof load test. I mentioned the ground vibration test we did for Nixus. Same people did the Perlin, and they created a flutter model for us. And then in this case, Morgan Sandercock built this device, which moves these weights to cause an input. And then we have accelerometers and we're measuring the response to the inputs. And basically, if a column begins or gets higher or it turns red, that's a bad thing. So you never see anything red or very high. So flying the Perlin 2, we did first flight in 2015 at Redmond, Oregon. We've been to Argentina 4 times. Getting to Argentina is a huge logistical experience. We've got a container that we own. And unfortunately, because of the situation, we have to take all of our spares. You can't get a spare shipped overnight by anybody. So on the sides, we've got shelves where we put our spares. And one design constraint to the Perlin was it had to fit in a 40-foot container inside a trailer. And that specified where the joint is. So the outer, maybe 2 meters of each wing comes off, so it all fits. But I'm pretty sure this is the longest trailer that Cobra's ever built. It's got like extra meter on the back. But we had to take the tongue off to fit it in the container and ship it that way. Here's a photo of the airport at El Calafate. It's like, 25 kilometers or so to the east of town, and the Andes in the background. Now, the Andes, they're relatively low down here. If you go up by Mendoza, Aconcagua, I think is almost 24,000 feet. Typically, most of these peaks here are around 11,000 feet. This is a top view. El Calafate is about 50 kilometers downwind of the White, which is where they have a joint national park with Chile and the glaciers. And so we're flying just downwind of the spine. Quick video. So take it out of the hangar when you go to fly it, climb in, and we go on oxygen as soon as we get in. So we're pre-breathing a little bit. Hatches come in, turn 90 degrees, and they're basically held in position by the pressure in the cabin. We've been towing behind the egret. Pretty fantastic tow plane. We've towed as high as 47,100 feet behind it. We got, at least 10 tows above 40,000 feet behind it, maybe a dozen. Egret making a contrail, releasing. Tail camera video from 76,000. Yes, that's what you see out the window. Sky's turning dark and We have telemetry, so the guys underground are acting as basically the third pilot because they can see all kinds of parameters that relate to safety. And then coming home to land. Okay, yeah, the egret, pretty amazing tow plane. I mentioned it normally makes a contrail above about 25,000 feet in Argentina. This is our high flight. Basically, the forecast said it would be best to the southwest. We went to the southwest and I didn't find anything, so we came back and we joggled off towards the west-northwest, found some lift. And you see there are a couple of occasions when I got out of the lifting zone and we're trying to do flight tests, and we got an altitude band for each of our test points. So the lift was really strong. We had to get out of the lift occasionally to keep from busting the top of our test band. So released on the graphic here, and you can see where we stayed level while we're doing flutter test points on the way up. And we did some high-speed flutter test points on the way down. About a 5.5 hour flight. The view from the cabin. On the sunny side, we can normally keep enough frost off the windows to see outside. But when I'm flying, I'm using, in this case, the right eye window and the horizon on the LX to keep the sunny side up. You can see the frost on the left side. Quick video from 76,000 feet. So anyway, we've flown higher than a U-2. Only the SR-71 officially is flown higher than the Berlin 2.
Yeah, that's really amazing.
Yeah, really impressive.
Well, thank you.
Which altitude is the goal of this project?
Flight level 900. It'd be like 27,400 meters, I think it is here.
And that's the limit for the aircraft, or why is it the limit? Yeah.
Yes, that's a limit for the aircraft. It gives us a little bit of maneuvering room. Theoretically, if you had a perfect wave where you could climb straight ahead at 1G, you could go to 96,000. But, that's a coffin quarter, they call it. So,
yeah. So
in closing, I think I've met a lot of fantastic people in soaring. It's been a great experience. The Earth's atmosphere is awesome. You talk to people that don't soar, and they really don't understand, strong thermal or especially the wave. And, life is short, so live it with gusto. So with that, I entertain any questions.
Yeah, so we talked a lot about wave flying in the Sierra Nevadas, but it's also a really good spot for thermal flights because I don't know what's the longest thermal flight in your area. Do you know?
On July 4th, about maybe about 2001, my brother Tom and I did a 1,500 kilometer flight from Tehachapi. And that was an SH-25, and it's on the OLC. So if you just look for that flight, but it was an utterly amazing day. We took off from Tehachapi. Normally Tehachapi we towed to 4,000 feet straight south of the airport, on top of the mountain where there's something called a bald spot. And on this particular day, we didn't find anything there, but to the south, about 3 miles or so, there had been a brush fire, and there was a thermal there that was picking up the ash, so we called the ash devil. And so we went over there, and it was a really strong climb to like 16,000 feet. So, I don't know, 15 minutes after takeoffs or so, we were 16,000 feet south of the airport. And so we just went north, and there are beautiful cloud streets all day. I think we circled like 5 times in 1,500 kilometers. And probably 3 of those times were, we're down to 16,000 and we wanted to get back up above 17 just to keep our true airspeed up and to cross gaps. But yeah, that was 1,500 kilometers in thermals from Tehachapi.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of thermal flights more than 1,000 kilometers in this area as well, because I can remember the time where the Baron Hilton Cup was at the Flying M range, which is maybe 200 kilometers south of Minden, isn't it, around? Or maybe it's just 150 or something like that.
It's about 150 southeast of Minden, yes.
Yeah. There were a lot of 1,000 K flights from just in those weeks where the guys were there.
Yeah. So I've done now, I think, 4,000 or 5,000 kilometer flights, FAI flights from Minden. Our challenge at Minden is, normally you'd want the first leg to have a quartering tailwind. And I think I've only once had a day where the day started early enough to do 1,000 K and the winds were it started early enough on a leg towards the northeast from Minden. Normally what happens is it starts at Minden maybe an hour to an hour and a half before you would have lift on a first leg towards the northeast. So we always end up having a small headwind going south. So you're going the wrong way around the triangle. But, like last year I did a triangle that way with the Nixus from Minden. For triangles, I did my first 2,000 K triangles from Inyakern. But more in the central Nevada is where to start for 1,000 K triangles. Now, Ely, of course, is a great place, but actually there are places that would be better if there was an airport there.
And if there's anybody like to come to Nevada for some flying, which is the best airport you would recommend where he can rent some gliders, or is it possible?
Unfortunately, I do not think anyone in Nevada currently is renting equipment that's suitable for cross country. Tom Stowers at High Country Soaring, he's retired, and Soaring NV, I think they have a 232 and an ASK 21. They'll do wave cross countries up and down the Carson Valley. But, Tom used to have, like an LS4 and the Discus that he rented, but no one's doing that right now. Unfortunately, economics is such that it's difficult.
Okay, because I remember, but it's 20 years ago or something like that, I rented, I think it was a Discus in Nevada from, I think it was Soaring called. So it's gone as well?
Yes, that's gone. Yeah, right now, the only group that gives tows is Soaring NV, which, Soaring Minden, he retired. And then Lori Harden started Soaring NV and she sold it. So unfortunately, it's a challenge.
That's really a pity. But so you got your area for you alone, huh? Together.
No, we have many friends.
There are really a lot of good pilots over there. Let's say Keith Essex, Dennis Tito, you called already, or Gordon Butcher and Uwe Kleinhempel. Is this always challenging to fly with the others, or you're really good friends, or how it works in Minden?
Well, I'm fortunate that we have the league. 3 years ago, I was not going to be able to go to Argentina because of COVID. We in Minden basically were not impacted in terms of soaring due to COVID. There's some places in the U.S. where they didn't let people go in parks and stuff, but as far as outdoor activities go, there's essentially no change in Minden. So I decided to start coaching these guys to help them do better in league. And it's been tremendous for the club because it's caused camaraderie, where before we were kind of cutthroat competitors. Now, at least on a league weekend, we cooperate and help each other, and we've had a lot of fun. So it's been very good.
So like all over the world, the glider pilots are always together, huh?
Yes.
There's another question concerning the Pearline project. Is there any plans for the next years to go back to Argentina?
Yes, we have funding to go back at least once more. And our intent is to go back this July. The good season is in August and September. So it looks like COVID won't be a problem. Last year shipping was a problem. This year they're canceling sailings because there's such a decline in shipping. But I'm optimistic that we'll be able to go back this year. But you never know, if another variant of COVID causes them to start closing borders and stuff, and then we won't be able to go back. But currently we're planning on going back.
And you're going in August or September? Did I get it right?
Yeah, that's when the polar vortex is best, when the stratospheric wave occurs. So, Jackie and I, there was one period there, I think we had, 9 winters in a row. Because you have winter here, and then you go there for winter, and you come home for winter. They missed part of your summer.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting, because the other guys for long distance flight, like Klaus Hohlmann, always goes in November, December over there for the long.
Well, you want long periods of daylight for the long cross countries. So, they're flying in the tropospheric wave, so they're staying below the tropopause. So yes, if you want to go cross country, and then you want to be in Argentina in December, January, and you're flying, below maybe 7,000 meters the whole time. But if you're going for altitude and you want to fly above the tropopause into the stratosphere, then you need to go in their wintertime.
Okay, I see the difference, of course.
Yes.
Okay, then the final question, or maybe I don't know if it's the final one, but there's another question. So you've flown gliders with 30 meters, like the Nixus wingspan, and gliders with 20 meters, like the Arcus, and you flew with just 11 meters in the ultralight class. Which is the best? Not for the performance, but it's obvious. But which one do you prefer?
Well, when you go to test pilot school, they teach you're supposed to say the airplane I'm testing right now is my favorite airplane. Wow.
But you're not at the test pilot school right now.
I know. Well, the Nixus, of course, for pure performance. If you get the handling qualities of a Sparrowhawk with a Nixus, i.e. the light beat, so you can turn into a thermal really quick. Wow. I really like the Discus. Arcus is a fantastic airplane, and the Nixus. So it depends on the mission. If I'm trying to set a 15-meter record, of course, like 15-meter airplane. But I guess the Nixus, just for the pure performance.
Okay.
I think there's one more questions if I'm right. The aviation guy wants to know on what platforms do you upload your flights to?
I'm old school. So I've been uploading to the OLC only, just because I don't have a good reason, but that's where my history is.
I think.
Okay, and what's the plans for this year? What's your goals?
Well, if we go back to Argentina, of course, the goal there will be the flight to 90,000 feet. And, this spring, we'll hopefully have a day like April 5th, 2015. So we make another crack at 3,000 Ks. So those would be the two biggest goals.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
think we covered all the questions.
Yeah, maybe you can stop the screen sharing and switch on your camera again so that everybody can see you again.
Okay.
Yeah, Jim, so thank you very much. It was really interesting to fly with you in all those different aircrafts in all the different areas. And I hope to see you soon with the 3000K flight or a flight level 900 flight somewhere in Argentina. And so thank you very much for being our guest.
Thank you very much.
Well, thanks for having me, Mateus. I read an article many years ago. George Lee said that if you've been successful, you're obligated to spread the word and help other pilots be successful. So hopefully this is an event that will help some pilots be more successful. So I wish everybody out there happy soaring and great success with your flights.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, we say thank you again and thank you for the audience, and we'll see us in 2 weeks. Actually, we don't know the topic right now. We're just figuring out. So you will see it in the OCN and WeGlide and Streckenflug.at and so on. What's going on with the next session? What will be the topic? So thank you and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.